The morning was busy, with people moving quickly, talking and laughing as they went about their day. The street corner where the small cafe sat was always crowded. Cars honked in the distance, and the faint smell of coffee mixed with the cold air. She walked slowly, almost as if she didn't want to be noticed. Her coat was plain, her shoes a little worn, and her hair fell loosely over her face. People passed her by without giving a second glance. Some glanced briefly and moved on. Some didn't even see her at all. She didn't mind. She liked it that way. Inside the cafe, the noise was different. It was quieter, but still filled with life. The soft clinking of cups and the low hum of conversation created a comfortable background. She took her usual seat near the window where she could watch people outside without being part of their world. She liked to see how life moved. She liked to see how people hurried, laughed, argued, and hurried again. It reminded her that she was part of this world, even if she stayed on the edges. A man sat a few tables away. He noticed her almost immediately, but didn't think much of it. She seemed ordinary to him, someone who would sit quietly. Sip coffee, maybe read a book and leave without leaving any impression. He had been watching people like her for years. People who looked quiet, shy, or unsure often surprised no one. He smiled slightly, convinced he understood her. People were easy to judge, or so he thought. She ordered her coffee and a small pastry, speaking softly to the barista. Her voice was calm and steady, polite but not loud. She smiled when she received her order, thanked the barista, and carried her tray to her seat. Her movements were smooth, careful, and almost unnoticed. The man's eyes followed her for a moment. He made a small mental note. She looked like someone who would never stand out. Someone who could never do anything remarkable. He was sure of it. She opened a small notebook from her bag. Its pages were filled with notes, sketches, and what looked like musical patterns. Occasionally, she would hum softly, almost inaudibly, while scribbling something down. The hum was gentle, almost shy. She didn't care if anyone heard it. She was practicing in her own way, alone. She liked to create small melodies and ideas in private before sharing them, if ever. The cafe filled with more people. Friends laughed together. A couple argued quietly. A man played with his phone. A woman typed furiously on a laptop. Everyone had a story, and she watched them, still small and quiet in her corner. The man noticed her humming and looked closer. It was soft, barely there, but there was something different about it. He frowned slightly. It didn't match the quiet, ordinary image he had made in his mind. But he shook his head. Maybe he was imagining it. People often fooled themselves. Time passed slowly. The cafe grew warmer as more people entered. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows on the pavement. She finished her coffee but didn't leave. Instead, she pulled out a small notebook and a pencil, jotting down more ideas. Every few minutes, she would tap her fingers lightly on the table, almost as if keeping time. The man watched, curiosity flickering for a moment. He still thought she wouldn't surprise anyone, but something about her movements, the rhythm of her fingers, made him pause. He didn't understand why he was paying attention to someone so quiet. A soft melody escaped her lips again, this time a little louder. It was still gentle, but now it carried a strange confidence. Her eyes closed for a moment as she hummed, lost in the sound she created. It was beautiful, unexpected. The man leaned back slightly, trying to convince himself he hadn't heard it clearly. He told himself that she was just humming a random tune, nothing special. But deep down, he knew it wasn't ordinary. He didn't want to admit it. It didn't fit the image he had created. She opened her bag again and carefully pulled out a small recorder. She placed it on the table and pressed a button. Soft notes began to fill the quiet cafe, gentle at first, then gradually more complex. The music was delicate, precise, and completely absorbed in expression. She didn't play loudly, didn't try to impress anyone. She played as if the world didn't exist, as if the music was a secret between her and herself. The man could no longer deny it. His eyes widened slightly. This was not what he expected. Other people in the cafe started to notice, turning their heads, watching the small woman in the corner who had always seemed so ordinary. Her fingers moved with skill, her expression calm and focused. The music told a story without words, something deep and personal. Some people whispered to each other, smiling, surprised by the unexpected sound. The atmosphere in the cafe shifted slightly, the usual chatter fading as the soft melody carried through the room. The man sat frozen, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had misjudged her completely. She finished the piece and gently pressed the stop button on the recorder. She looked up briefly, noticing the quiet attention around her. A small, polite smile appeared on her face. She didn't brag, didn't announce herself, and didn't make a show. She simply returned to her notebook, picking up her pencil again as if nothing had happened. The man sat back, stunned. He had never been so wrong about someone in his life. The confidence he had felt moments ago was replaced by surprise, maybe even shame. Outside, the world continued as usual. People walked by, unaware of the small scene unfolding inside the cafe. But inside, something had changed. People had seen, heard, and felt something unexpected. The quiet woman in the corner had revealed a depth that no one could have guessed. Even the man who thought he knew everything about her at first glance realized how little he understood. Judgments, assumptions, and appearances had all been wrong. She packed her things slowly, still calm, still quiet. Her eyes glanced out the window for a moment, watching the busy street. The world outside went on as if nothing had happened, but inside the cafe, a small lesson had been learned. Talent, depth, and beauty often hide in the quietest corners, waiting for the right moment to emerge. She walked out into the street once again, unnoticed by most, carrying her music and her secret strength with her. The man stayed behind for a long time, thinking about what he had just witnessed. He realized that the world was far bigger than his assumptions. People were more complex, more capable, and more surprising than he had ever allowed himself to believe. And the quiet woman in the corner had taught him that lesson without saying a word. All she had done was be herself, play her music, and let the truth of her talent shine quietly in a world too busy to notice. It was a moment that would stay with him, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that sometimes the most remarkable people are the ones no one expects to notice. She walked slowly through the quiet streets after leaving the cafe. The sun was higher now, warming the sidewalks, but the city still felt too loud, too fast for her. She liked quiet. She liked the moments when she could think and hear herself. Music was always with her, even when she didn't play it aloud. Every sound around her, the distant horn of a car, the chatter of people, the rhythm of footsteps became part of a melody she carried in her mind. It was her way of keeping peace, a way to survive in a world that often moved too quickly. Her small apartment was modest. A single room with a tiny kitchen and a window that looked out over a brick wall, but it was hers. She closed the door softly and dropped her bag by the bed. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, comforting in its simplicity. She took out her old keyboard, a small instrument with a few keys missing, but it had been with her for years. She touched the keys gently, remembering the first time she had played. The first notes that had felt like magic in her fingers. Music had saved her in ways she didn't yet understand fully. It had given her a voice when words had failed. She remembered the early days. Nights spent with a single lamp, fingers stiff from hours of practice, making mistakes over and over. People had told her she wouldn't succeed, that it was impossible. Sometimes even friends had laughed at her, not cruelly, but in disbelief, as if her dedication was amusing. She had learned to ignore them, to focus on the sound she created rather than the judgments around her. She didn't play to impress. She played to survive, to live, to exist in a way that felt real. There were days when she had wanted to give up. When the world seemed too big, too critical, and her own doubts too loud. But each time she touched the keys, each time she let her hands move with the rhythm in her mind, she found herself again. The music reminded her who she was. It reminded her that even when she felt small, she could create something enormous, something that no one could take away. Her neighbors didn't know much about her. They saw her leaving early in the morning, returning late at night. But they didn't see the hours of quiet struggle. The countless notes played and erased, the silent victories that no one witnessed. She didn't mind. Recognition wasn't her goal. Her satisfaction came from the act itself, from the movement of her fingers and the sound that followed. She was learning, always learning, shaping her music in her own way. Even her family hadn't understood her fully. They had wanted her to take a more traditional path, a safe path. When she had first told them she wanted to pursue music seriously, there had been confusion, disappointment, and sometimes anger. They had not seen music as a real job, not as something that could bring her stability or security. It had hurt at first, the feeling of being misunderstood by the people closest to her. But she had learned to channel that hurt into her music, to transform doubt into something powerful. Every note she played carried the weight of those unspoken words, silent judgment, and her quiet determination. She opened a notebook filled with scribbled notes and ideas. Some were melodies, some were chords, some were fragments of songs she had not yet finished. She flipped through the pages slowly, touching the pencil marks, remembering the nights she had stayed awake, trying to capture a sound before it disappeared. The work was messy, imperfect, but it was hers. She had learned to love imperfection because it was real, because it was proof that she had tried, that she had lived. Her hands moved over the keys again, softly at first, then with more confidence. She played a piece she had been working on for weeks, a melody that had started as a simple hum in her mind. Each note felt alive, each pause full of meaning. The room was small, but it was full of sound, full of life that no one else could hear. She closed her eyes, letting herself become part of the music, letting it carry her into a space where the world's opinions could not reach. The memory of the cafe earlier that morning lingered in her mind. People had noticed her music for a moment, just a moment, but it had felt different. There had been a tension, yes, but also surprise and something unspoken. A recognition of skill and feeling that went beyond appearances. She wondered if anyone else would ever see her like that, really see her, without judgment or doubt. But she didn't worry. She knew that her music had value, that her voice mattered. Even if only she could hear it fully, as she played, she thought about the people who had doubted her. Not with anger, but with clarity. Their disbelief was a reflection of their own limitations, not hers. She didn't need them to understand. She only needed herself and the music she created from the quiet corners of her life. Each note was a statement, a small act of rebellion against the idea that talent had to be loud or obvious. She had learned that true expression could exist in silence, in patience, in the unseen moments where no one was watching. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, casting shadows across the room. She kept playing, experimenting, creating new melodies, abandoning others, reshaping ideas again and again. Her focus was total. There was no room for distraction, no space for doubt. Only the sound, only the music, only the feeling that this small room, these simple tools, could create something immense. The door to her apartment was still closed. The world outside still moving fast and unseeing, but inside, time had slowed. Each note she played was deliberate, each chord a conversation with herself. She smiled softly when a sequence came together perfectly, not for anyone else, but because it felt right. She had learned that satisfaction was internal, that applause, recognition, or approval were optional, not necessary. Her life, her music, her choices belonged to her alone. In the quiet moments between pieces, she reflected on her journey. How far she had come, the obstacles she had faced, the small victories that no one else had noticed. She remembered the moments when she had been tempted to stop, when the world's doubt had seemed too heavy. And she remembered how she had chosen to continue, again and again, because the music inside her was stronger than the fear outside. Even now, she was still learning. Every day brought new challenges, new ideas, new ways to stretch her abilities. She had discovered patience, persistence, and a quiet confidence that did not rely on others. Music had become not just a skill, but a part of who she was, a mirror reflecting her strength, resilience, and imagination. And though the world often overlooked her, she knew that she was building something lasting, something that could touch others in ways words could not. Night fell, and the room grew dim. She finally stopped playing, her fingers tired, but her spirit renewed. She wrote a few notes in her notebook, reflecting on the melodies of the day. The ideas that had come together, and the ones that needed more work. She closed the notebook carefully, placing it beside the keyboard, and leaned back, listening to the silence that had returned to the room. It was quiet, yes, but it was full of potential. Full of all the music that had been born here today and that would continue to grow. She looked out the window. The city lights flickering in the distance, the distant sounds of life still moving fast. She smiled to herself, knowing that the world's noise could never drown out the music she carried inside. She had learned to trust her instincts, to believe in her talent, to continue creating even when no one else noticed. The quiet struggle of her life had shaped her, had given her strength and depth that few could imagine. And though the road ahead would not always be easy, she knew that her music would always guide her, should always remind her of who she was and what she could achieve. The day arrived unexpectedly. A small poster had been pinned to the community bulletin board, barely noticeable among dozens of other announcements. It mentioned a local music event, a chance for anyone to play, no matter their experience. It wasn't a big stage or a prestigious competition, just a small gathering in a local hall. But it meant more than that. It was a chance to step out of her quiet corner, a chance to be seen, even if only for a few minutes. She stared at the poster for a long time, her hand lingering on the edge. Doubts began to creep in. What if she wasn't ready? What if she stumbled in front of people? What if her music, the music she had nurtured for years in silence, didn't translate to an audience? The thought of failing in front of strangers made her stomach twist, and yet another part of her stirred with curiosity and a quiet determination. She had always played alone, but now the possibility of sharing her music pressed on her, challenging her to step forward. For hours, she walked around her apartment, thinking. She considered the risks and the rewards, the fear and the excitement. She remembered all the nights spent practicing alone, all the times she had questioned her abilities but chosen to continue anyway. That inner strength whispered to her now, reminding her that the music was real, and that her skill had grown quietly, unseen but steady. The choice was hers, to stay hidden or to reveal what she had nurtured for so long. Finally, she decided to attend. It wasn't a loud declaration or a dramatic gesture. It was quiet, deliberate. She packed her small keyboard, making sure everything was secure, and left her apartment. The walk to the hall felt longer than it was. Each step carried the weight of anticipation and anxiety. People passed by, unaware of the significance of this small journey. For someone who had lived so much of her life in quiet practice, the hall was modest. A simple space with folding chairs and a small stage at the front. Some musicians were already setting up, tuning instruments and exchanging polite greetings. She found a seat at the back, trying to blend in, hoping no one would notice her before she played. Her heart raced. The hum of conversation around her felt like static noise, amplifying the tension inside. She clutched her bag, trying to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she had done this countless times in her room, alone. This was just a different space. She noticed him almost immediately. The same man from the cafe, sitting near the middle of the audience, his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. He hadn't recognized her at first, but when he did, a small frown appeared on his face. He still thought he knew what to expect. He had seen many performers, many amateurs, and he was confident that she would be ordinary, unremarkable. He had no idea how wrong he was. Announcements were made. Performers called to the stage one by one. The room filled with the soft sounds of tuning instruments, nervous laughter, and polite applause. She felt a knot in her stomach, the familiar fear of being judged, of making a mistake. But she also felt something else, a quiet thrill. The possibility of revealing her true self in a world that rarely noticed her. The moment hung in the air, tense and fragile, waiting for her choice. When her name was called, she hesitated. The audience turned, some curious, some indifferent, expecting another ordinary performance. She walked forward slowly, carrying her small keyboard carefully. Each step felt heavy yet liberating. She had imagined this moment countless times, and now it was real. Her pulse raced, her palms were sweaty, but her mind cleared. Focusing on what mattered most, the music, she set up the keyboard and adjusted the stand, careful to make sure everything was ready. The audience murmured softly, some standing quietly, some whispering to each other. He watched, leaning slightly forward, eyes narrowed. He expected hesitation, mistakes, uncertainty. He expected a performance that would confirm his assumptions. He was certain she could not impress anyone. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost shy, but perfectly measured, each one precise and deliberate. The sound filled the room gently, drawing attention, pulling the audience in without demanding it. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her fingers, letting the melody flow naturally from years of unseen practice. Each note carried emotion, carefully crafted, speaking volumes without words. The man's eyes widened slightly. He was surprised, confused, unable to reconcile what he was hearing with the quiet, ordinary figure he had judged. Her music grew gradually, gaining complexity, depth, and expression. It wasn't flashy or loud. It was controlled, expressive, and captivating. The audience, initially polite and reserved, leaned forward, listening intently. Whispers faded, heads turned, eyes widened. She could feel the shift in the room, the slow realization that this performer, so quiet and unassuming, possessed skill far beyond expectation. Her fingers danced across the keys with ease, her body swaying slightly in rhythm with the music. The notes told a story of struggle, perseverance, and hope. A story that resonated deeply with everyone present. The man who had doubted her was frozen, unable to look away. His confidence faltered as each note revealed a talent he had never imagined. He realized painfully that he had misjudged her completely. The quiet exterior, the unassuming demeanor, had hidden years of dedication, practice, and natural ability. He felt a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and awe. She had shattered every assumption he had made, every expectation he had carried into the room. As the piece continued, the audience was drawn deeper into her performance. People held their breath at the crescendos, felt the gentle sadness in slower passages, and experienced the warmth and energy of brighter notes. There was no need for applause yet, no need for commentary. The music spoke for itself, capturing attention and admiration with subtlety and grace. The room was transformed from a casual gathering into a shared experience of emotion and artistry. Her mind was focused entirely on the music, not the audience, not the man who had doubted her, not the small hall filled with strangers. The only thing that mattered was the connection between her fingers and the keys, between the sound and her inner expression. She had practiced alone for so long that performing now, even in front of others, felt like an extension of her private world. She had learned to trust her instincts, to let the music carry her, and to allow herself to be vulnerable in a controlled, meaningful way. The piece reached its conclusion. A series of soft, lingering notes that seemed to hang in the air, waiting for recognition. Silence followed, heavy and expectant. The audience was stunned, unsure of how to respond immediately. Then, slowly, applause began. One clap, then another, growing into a wave of appreciation. Some people stood, moved by the unexpected beauty and emotion they had just witnessed. The man who had doubted her finally joined in, though his expression remained a mixture of awe and realization. He had been completely wrong, and he knew it. She smiled softly, a quiet acknowledgement of the moment. She did not bow dramatically or seek attention. She had shared her music, revealed her talent, and allowed herself to be seen. That alone was enough. She packed up her keyboard carefully, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The audience continued to applaud, some whispering words of admiration. Others simply stunned by the performance they had witnessed. She walked back to her seat, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet pride. The man watched her, reflecting on what he had seen. He realized how easily assumptions could mislead, how appearances could hide depth and ability. He had underestimated her, judged her too quickly, and the lesson was humbling. He understood now that true talent often lived in quiet places, unnoticed, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She had chosen that moment carefully, and the result was undeniable. The rest of the event continued, but the memory of her performance lingered. Conversations often returned to her music, the skill, the emotion, and the unexpected quality she had brought to the hall. Other performers were impressive, but her performance had a different impact. It had captured attention, changed perceptions, and reminded everyone present that assumptions could be wrong. People talked about the quiet woman who had amazed them, who had shown that depth and talent could be hidden in plain sight. After the event, she walked home slowly, the evening air cool against her skin. She felt lighter, freer, as though a weight she had carried for years had been released. The experience had been transformative, not because of recognition or praise, but because she had taken the risk to reveal herself. She had faced doubt, fear, and the unknown, and she had emerged stronger and more confident. The music inside her had found a voice outside, and that voice would continue to grow. The man returned home as well, thinking about the day, the performance, and the quiet strength of someone he had underestimated. He had learned an important lesson about people, talent, and the danger of judgment. And though he had not expected it, he felt inspired by her courage, dedication, and skill. She had quietly, completely, and unexpectedly shown the world what she was capable of. And it was a lesson he would never forget. The hall was quiet after her performance. The applause had faded, but the echoes of the music still lingered in the air, wrapping the room in a sense of wonder. People were talking softly among themselves, exchanging astonished glances and whispered words of admiration. Some had tears in their eyes, not because the music was perfect, but because it had touched something deep inside them. The notes had carried emotion that felt familiar, as if they had been waiting to hear this story told without words. She remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, letting the energy of the moment settle around her. The thrill of performing had not left her, but neither had the quiet calm she always carried. She had learned to keep her emotions steady, to let the music speak without needing to shout her presence. The audience had responded, not to a performance, but to a connection, and that was more meaningful than any praise could be. The man who had doubted her was still in his seat, staring at the empty stage with a mixture of disbelief and reflection. He could not stop thinking about what he had just witnessed. His assumptions, formed in a few casual moments at the cafe, had been completely wrong. He had expected an ordinary performance, perhaps even a clumsy attempt. But what he had seen was skill, emotion, and years of dedication hidden behind a quiet exterior. He realized that people often carry stories and abilities, invisible to those who glance only at appearances. Several performers followed, each bringing their own style and energy to the small stage. Some were confident, some nervous, and some had moments of brilliance. But the memory of her performance lingered in the room. People often returned to it in their conversations, describing the unexpected depth and beauty of her music. She had set a new standard not by being louder or more dramatic, but by being sincere, focused, and true to herself. After the event, she stayed behind quietly, helping to pack up the equipment and speaking softly to the organizers. No one expected her to do much, and she did not draw attention. She was careful, methodical, and humble, letting the work speak for itself. The man noticed this too. He had assumed she might be arrogant or self-centered, perhaps someone who would seek praise after such a remarkable display. But she was the opposite. She was grounded, aware, and unassuming, which made her talent even more striking in contrast to his expectations. The walk home was calm and reflective. The city lights painted patterns on the streets, and the distant hum of life moved around her like a gentle river. She replayed the performance in her mind, noting the small mistakes she wanted to correct, the sequences that had gone exactly as she had imagined. She did not dwell on the applause or recognition. Her satisfaction came from having shared her music honestly, from having taken the risk to reveal herself to others, and from having survived the moment with her own integrity intact in her apartment. She set down her bag and unpacked the small keyboard. She felt the familiar comfort of her own space, the reassurance of being surrounded by objects that knew her story. She touched the keys lightly, testing melodies, exploring new ideas that had come during the performance. The night stretched on, quiet and private, giving her space to process, to learn, and to continue growing. Each note she played was a reminder that her music was not defined by the recognition of others, but by the passion and effort she poured into it. Meanwhile, the man was sitting in his apartment, thinking about the performance. He could not shake the image of her, sitting quietly on stage, creating music that commanded attention without demanding it. He had been humbled, reminded that the world was full of hidden talent, hidden stories, and hidden strength. He realized that assumptions were dangerous, and that patience, observation, and humility were essential to understanding people fully. He felt a strange admiration for her courage and skill. Mixed with regret for his earlier judgment, the next day, news of her performance spread quietly among the local community. People spoke of the unexpected talent, the beauty of the music, and the emotional depth that had touched so many. She did not seek this attention, nor did she know of it fully. She continued her daily life, walking the streets, visiting the cafe, and practicing her music in the quiet of her apartment. Yet the memory of the performance lingered, a small, shining proof that risk, honesty, and dedication could create moments of profound impact. She reflected often on the experience. The fear she had felt, the doubts, the what-ifs, they were all part of the process, part of the journey that had led her to this moment. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She had faced the unknown, trusted her own skill and instincts, and emerged stronger. That realization gave her a deep sense of satisfaction and motivation. Fueling her continued practice and growth, her music became more confident, more expressive, and more refined in the days that followed. She experimented with new styles, tested new ideas, and pushed the boundaries of her creativity. She no longer played solely for herself. She played knowing that her talent could resonate with others, even if she never sought the spotlight. Each session at her keyboard was an opportunity to explore, to refine, and to communicate her inner world through sound. The man, too, became more thoughtful in the days following the performance. He found himself paying closer attention to people, considering what might lie beneath their quiet appearances, and reflecting on the assumptions he had made too quickly in the past. Her performance had challenged his perspective, reshaped his understanding of talent, and reminded him of the humility required to truly see and appreciate others. The lesson was subtle but powerful, leaving a lasting impression that would influence how he viewed the world. As weeks passed, she continued to attend small gatherings, each one offering a chance to play and connect with listeners. She grew more comfortable with performing, more confident in her abilities, and more patient with herself. The music remained her sanctuary, her expression, and her voice. Bridging the private world she had nurtured for years with the external world, she was learning to navigate. She realized that the impact of her music was not only on the audience but also on herself. Each performance, each practice session, deepened her understanding of herself, her emotions, and her capabilities. She became more resilient, more self-aware, and more willing to take risks. The quiet strength she had cultivated in isolation now had a place in the world. Visible not through loud gestures, but through the subtle, undeniable power of her talent. The man eventually approached her, not with criticism or skepticism, but with respect and curiosity. He asked about her journey, the hours of practice, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke simply, honestly, without pride or pretense, sharing the story of dedication, struggle, and passion that had shaped her music. He listened intently, finally understanding that talent is often hidden, and that those who appear quiet or ordinary may possess extraordinary gifts. The interaction left him inspired and humbled, reminding him that observation without judgment could reveal truths far beyond initial impressions. Through these experiences, she discovered a new dimension of her artistry. Music was no longer a solitary endeavor. It was a bridge, a language that connected her to others, conveying emotions and stories that words could not capture. The quiet struggle of her life, the long nights of practice, and the persistent self-doubt had all contributed to the richness of her expression. Each note she played carried not just technical skill, but lived experience, resilience, and authenticity. Her life continued, a balance of quiet solitude and public expression. She moved through the world with a new awareness, recognizing the hidden potential in herself and in others. The music remained her guide, her constant companion, and her most powerful voice. And in every performance, whether in a small hall, a quiet cafe, or in the privacy of her apartment, she carried the lessons of courage, authenticity, and the quiet triumph of revealing one's true self in a world that often overlooks the extraordinary in the ordinary. Weeks passed since the performance at the local hall, and life slowly returned to its regular rhythm. Yet things had shifted subtly for her. She moved through her days with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from facing fear and stepping forward despite uncertainty. She practiced every morning, refining her melodies, exploring new harmonies, and pushing her skills further than before. Music was no longer only a private escape. It had become a bridge to the world, a way to connect with others without words. People she had once passed unnoticed now recognized her, not always by name, but by the presence she carried. There were quiet nods in the cafe, friendly smiles from neighbors, and polite comments from other musicians she occasionally encountered. None of it was overwhelming. It was gentle acknowledgement, a reflection of the impact she had quietly made. She accepted it with humility, knowing that the true value lay not in recognition but in the music itself and the courage it took to share it. Her relationship with the man who had doubted her evolved slowly. He often approached her after events or during community gatherings, asking questions about her practice, her inspirations, and the challenges she faced. He listened intently, his previous skepticism replaced by curiosity and respect. Their conversations were thoughtful, unhurried, and honest. Through these interactions, he learned about the dedication, patience, and resilience that had shaped her talent. He realized that true mastery is often built in solitude, away from judgment, applause, or public acknowledgement. She began performing more often, though always selectively, in places where she felt comfortable and where her music could be appreciated for its depth rather than its spectacle. Small gatherings, local cafes, and community events became stages where her music could speak, and she found herself growing more comfortable with public attention. Each performance reinforced the lessons she had learned about fear, courage, and authenticity. She no longer measured her success by applause alone, but by the connection she felt with her music and the quiet impact it had on those listening. The experiences she had accumulated over the years-long nights of practice, moments of doubt, and the subtle victories she had achieved along gave her performances a unique depth. People could sense the authenticity in her music, the story of perseverance woven into each note. Audiences responded not only to her technical skill, but to the emotional truth she expressed. She had learned that talent is not merely a gift, but a commitment, and that sharing it honestly, even in small ways, carries profound significance. The man often reflected on his initial assumptions. Humbled by the realization of how little he had understood, he became more aware of the quiet potential in those around him, recognizing that first impressions are often misleading. Observing her growth and dedication reminded him that patience and open-mindedness reveal truths that quick judgment cannot. The experience transformed his approach to people, making him more thoughtful, respectful, and appreciative of hidden abilities. Life continued, and she encountered new opportunities, though she approached them cautiously. Invitations to play in slightly larger venues or at local gatherings presented themselves. She weighed each opportunity carefully. Considering the potential for genuine connection and the comfort of her own readiness, each choice became a test of her courage, a reaffirmation that stepping into the world with authenticity and confidence was more important than seeking fame or recognition. She embraced these opportunities with grace, letting her music guide her and trusting her instincts. Her private practice remained central to her growth. Each morning, she approached her keyboard with intention, experimenting with melodies, harmonies, and rhythms. The quiet hours of solitude allowed her to reflect on her journey, analyze her mistakes, and develop new ideas. She maintained a balance between public performance and private creation, understanding that each informed the other. The discipline she cultivated in isolation translated into expressive, controlled, and emotionally resonant performances that continued to touch listeners deeply. She encountered young musicians seeking guidance. Drawn to her calm presence and evident skill, she offered advice and encouragement, sharing lessons learned from years of dedicated practice and quiet perseverance. She emphasized patience, focus, and honesty in creation, reminding them that talent grows gradually and often unseen. Her mentorship was gentle but meaningful, instilling confidence and inspiring determination in those who listened. Through these experiences, she discovered the joy of shared growth and learning. Music became not only a personal refuge, but a tool for connection, a way to influence and inspire others without words. Her quiet strength, built over years of solitary dedication, now extended beyond herself, touching people in ways she had never imagined. The same patience and humility that had defined her personal journey became gifts she could offer to the wider community. The man continued to observe and learn, humbled by her consistency and depth. Each interaction reminded him of the danger of assumptions and the richness that lies hidden beneath quiet surfaces. He came to understand that true talent is not always obvious, and that people's worth is often measured not by immediate visibility, but by the dedication, resilience, and authenticity they carry within. His respect for her grew, not only for her music, but for her character, patience, and integrity. Months passed, and she performed at a community festival, a larger event than she had previously attempted. She felt the familiar tension before stepping onto the stage, but also a sense of readiness and trust in her abilities. The hall was filled with people, their chatter fading as she began to play. The music moved through the space, soft at first, then gaining richness and complexity. Listeners leaned forward, absorbed by the sound, transported by the melodies and the emotion behind each note. The man in the front row watched with awe and admiration. Fully aware of the journey she had taken to arrive at this moment,